City Councilor Nicole Rogers, great to see you again, and thanks for coming back again to New Mexico in Focus.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Now, the National Guard left Albuquerque at the end of last year after spending months along Central Avenue, largely in District 6, your district. What did you see during the time that they were deployed?
Yeah, I definitely kept a close eye on what was happening, really real time on the ground. We had our National Guard members in our real-time crime center monitoring our camera system. We had them, I saw them at platforms for our transit areas, like on Central, specifically the Central Corridor. And then also I would see them kind of holding perimeter during large events that we would have in our district, whether it was a SWAT activation or a crash or a fire or something like that. They were really the ones keeping the perimeter. And that's basically what I saw them doing.
Okay. Did you hear any feedback from your constituents during the time that they were there?
Yeah, I think constituents, I think we did a good job at least communicating, what they were going to be wearing, what we thought they would be doing. So I think at the beginning of the deployment or the news of the deployment, people were really unsure what the objective was, what's the purpose, what are we trying to achieve, and then as it went along, kind of just became a normal part of our policing, really, just the normal, status quo of policing. So I didn't hear a whole lot of backlash or people, kind of saying they shouldn't be here or shouldn't be serving in this way. But that was really it. It was kind of not a lot of fanfare.
Okay. Now, before we get to what the National Guard leader in charge of that operation had to say about it, what was your understanding of what that objective was before they came?
Yeah, I think that was something I asked for clarification on early on. Seeing the chief's letter that went to the governor and the list of things that he asked for, I was really interested in the humanitarian portion of that. And public safety is more than just policing, so I thought it was a really great opportunity to actually connect folks to help, and as well as policing. And then the executive order came out, and it had the exact, same list of the things that the chief asked for. And so I just wanted to know in practice, how is it actually going to work? What are we training them on? What's our objective? What are we going to be actually using them for? Which I don't think was as clear based on the list. In practice, what are we actually going to do?
Right.
Yeah.
In January, Major General Miguel Aguilar spoke to state lawmakers on the Senate Judiciary about the deployment. Here's what he had to say.
What you had over about an 8-week period was a stress test to the criminal justice system, as well documented, I think, as I've ever seen. What we came to realize is that absent structural change, current outcomes are predictable and they're self-sustaining. And so, and that was what we found in the operation is no matter what we did from a criminal enforcement perspective, the environment didn't really change much.
Do you agree that there are structural problems creating crime for people in your district? And if you do, what are they?
Yeah, I think structurally we cannot police our way out of this only. So I think what was missing from the Albuquerque deployment, I think, was a clear objective to what it is we were wanting to do. If we look at places that they've been deployed since, like Espanola, right, there was a clear objective to go after violent crime and substance abuse mitigation to make sure folks weren't overdosing, right? So harm reduction. That was missing from our deployment, right? And so I asked before, during, and even after, the objective was not clear, and I think that's why Major General maybe feels that way, that we did not use them to the full capacity and to the skills. The New Mexico National Guard is a statewide asset, and it's not about, the question isn't about should they serve or should they not serve. It's really about how do we deploy them strategically, effectively, humanely, so we meet the objective. But first we need to know what that objective is.
Right. Now, a lot of his testimony and his statements to lawmakers were focused on crime specifically, and he shared some data, around 1,000 arrests along Central during the nearly 2-month stretch. The largest chunk of those arrests, about 40%, were arrested for what he called public order crimes, nearly 30% for drug offenses, and just short of 20% on violent crimes. The rest were property crimes, a smaller number. He says about 80% of the people that were arrested, though, were released and on pretrial conditions, and half were released completely within 48 hours. I have a lot of questions about those numbers and the focus of that operation still, but let's start with that assertion that releasing people ahead of trial is maybe the most significant systemic issue that he couldn't work around. Where do you stand on pretrial detention and the so-called revolving doors influence on safety in your district?
Yeah, I think I'm glad that our state legislature is having that conversation in the legislature right now. I think that we have to balance both the help with also the public safety aspect, but we're not going to police our way out of this. And I think that that's why, the systemic issue, that's not a law enforcement issue. That's not a National Guard issue. That's not even a city council issue. This is a state issue that has to be fixed in Santa Fe. And I think where I stand on it is I think that there needs to be there's already clear processes in our judicial system to render somebody incompetent to stand trial, right? And so I think what we're doing in the legislature is making those a little bit more robust, and to say that if you are not competent to stand trial, then another evaluation needs to be done to see if you're competent to be released on your own recognizance. Because for probably between 600 and 800 folks in my district that are severely mentally ill, they're not going to be able to make that decision for themselves. They're not of sound mind. And I think but I know one thing from the community, they don't want law enforcement to be making that decision, right? So if they are doing things that are harm to themselves or others, then law enforcement should step in, and then we should meet them with the mental health resources that they need to be able to make a better decision for themselves. So policing is not going to fix this, but we have to couple them both, and I think that's why we're seeing much more success. But it's the same laws in Espanola statewide that are in Albuquerque, right? But again, the objective is clear, and we're working on that, and I think it's showing much better outcomes.
Right. How much say did you have before the National Guard came to your district, and would you have liked more?
Absolutely. I think that's one thing I was vocal about. Let's be real though. The governor and the mayor don't need my permission to do what they did. I believe that both of them were trying to do what they could within their power to do something transformational for my district. But as the leader that's most impacted, I was not listened to. I asked several times in meetings with Major General, with the governor, with mayor, asking specifically for what I know my community needs. And so I don't feel like I was listened to. I do hope that if we try this again, we can take what we learned from Albuquerque and other areas. But I live on Wyoming and Central. I am the most impacted, and I really do know what my community needs. And it's both. It's the public safety, but it's also utilizing the National Guard for the skills that they're good at, which is logistics, coordination, neighborhood stabilization, and that's what I need, and that's public safety. Instead of just thinking about policing, we miss the boat, and thinking of the broader public safety and how could National Guard have utilized them to their full potential of the skills that they already possess.
Okay, so was the failure in your mind then in planning this whole thing or the execution of the operation?
I can't speak to planning because I wasn't involved in the conversations leading up to them coming. But I know for sure, leadership here, I didn't see the type of leadership I'd like to have seen that I was asking for when it came to strategic objective, so that we know what we're trying to do, and then bringing the best beautiful minds in the room from all jurisdictions to figure out how to execute to make sure we meet our objective. And that I did not see.
Okay. So if locking up 700 people in 2 months for drug and public issue crimes isn't the answer, how do we go about fixing these longstanding problems in your district if crime isn't the top, I wouldn't say priority, but how to attack it first?
Yeah, I think it's a multi-pronged approach. So systematically, like you mentioned, we have to do the changing of the laws in the state legislature, which I think we're on the way to that. The governor should be signing that bill soon. I think we need resources put into mental health. So I'm asking folks like UNM Hospital, UNM HSC, to expand the programs that are in there, like their alcohol and substance abuse program that has amazing outcomes. But again, they haven't expanded that program, right? The street medicine. education. We need those resources to be expanded. We need places for, okay, if we have civil commitment, where are they going to go? Right? We don't have the infrastructure in this state to house folks in that way right now and give them the humane care that they deserve. So that's another systematic. But the biggest thing I don't think anybody's talking about is poverty alleviation strategies. The bottom line is, if you are addicted to something and you have the means to get help, you can pay for that help and you can get that help. If you don't and you're on Medicaid, the waiting list to get into a substance abuse program is very long. So we have to be looking at poverty. In New Mexico, it's also generational poverty. They don't have that line, that helpline, that lifeline in their own family to help with issues. So poverty also is a systematic change that we have to begin to think about.
Okay. Through that multi-pronged approach, obviously a lot of those issues are long-term issues that would take long-term fixes. What do you say to those that would argue that the long-term fixes aren't feasible until the short-term issue of crime is fixed? And how should that be approached all at once? Do you think that there's a holistic strategy going on in the mind of our state lawmakers, city leaders?
I'm not sure. I think that's a really good question. I think what my heart tells me is that we're thinking of this as a linear approach. And when you recited the numbers, we arrested 1,000 people. Did it help? Did it meet the objective? No, it didn't. And I think what I know of working with the governor for this, 2 years in my term, she wants results of the perception of public safety when she's driving down Central, right? And that what's driving the perception to make people feel like they're not safe in my neighborhood, right? And that's the suffering that we're seeing. And we need to look at it from that perspective, that these are folks, for whatever reason that they're there, they're suffering, right? And how do we, in the roles that we're in and with the immense amount of resources we have access to, how do we alleviate that suffering for folks? And sometimes that is law enforcement. That is going into jail, right? But if you're out in a day and a half, usually you need 3 days or 4 days to detox, right? So it used to be that jail was a place that you can connect to those resources and make a different decision for yourself because you were there long enough to be able to have those thoughts and get clarity of mind for a little bit. But that's not the case right now. So the judicial system, we have outpatient treatment, drug courts, we have lots of systems set up. But again, we don't have enough to cycle through the amount of people that need it. And so we just need to segment people based on what they need. And we know we have 600 plus folks that are severely mental health, that need those types of severe mental health services. Let's focus on those. I don't know that anybody is focusing on those, and that's the perception of safety when you don't have folks not in their right mind all over my community.
Okay. I just want to stay on perception for one more question here. What do folks miss who don't live in your district, who don't spend time in your district, who maybe tuned into that Senate Judiciary hearing? What do they miss in terms of perspective within your district?
Yeah. When I go, I'm always out in my areas, all of them. And when I see beautiful people who live here, who want to feel like they are safe in their neighborhoods, I see that the tide is turning. We have a lot of investment going into especially this area with investment in food justice, in housing access, in parks, $32 million going into our parks. We have an amazing walking school bus program at Whittier and Wilson Elementary that is like going worldwide in Australia and places like Hawaii that came to find out what we're doing in District 6, right? Because these conditions that exist that our kids are walking through are not acceptable, and we're all pushing in the same direction. And we're seeing huge dividends in crime reduction by seeing calls for service in our alleys going down now that we have neighbors taking back their alleys, and us in government just coming along with the resources that they need to do it. So I say to folks, we know what we need. We just need to start listening. And I know what my community needs, and I just need the resources. Governor, mayor, give me the resources and watch me work. We can do this. We can absolutely do this. We did it already in COVID. Think about it. We housed, under the governor's lockdown, every person who needed it during COVID. We can do this. Let's just not stop.
Before you go, I know I said that was the last question, but I got one more. If you could be involved, what would a second deployment look like in your district?
Yeah, a second deployment. I would take what we're learning from other areas like Espanola. I would definitely want to focus on the harm reduction. I would definitely want to continue to focus on what other things can they do to help APD, right? But not just watching cameras and doing the perimeter. I would couple them with ACS. I would do a massive outreach, like close down the state streets. If you've driven in my district on Central, Wisconsin behind the McDonald's, Pennsylvania, Dallas, Utah, just the state streets. Let's close off between Chico and Central. Let's get some warming stations. Let's get some hygiene trailers. Let's use the National Guard's resources because it is a disaster. It feels and looks like a disaster area. And this help me stabilize these folks and get them pathed into what the mayor has built in this network of gateways. Let's get them to these gateways and path them out, and let's see if we can clear and get folks into the appropriate bed for what they need and get folks pathed into something different. And then again, if they don't want to take those options, then the last street is, if you have an open warrant and you don't want to get help, then the last stop on the last street is with Sheriff Allen or Chief Barker if you don't want to make a better decision for yourself. And I think that we could see on a regular basis, but it's going to have to be both. We need both.
Understood. City Councilor Rogers, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.